A girl like you. You don't belong in our world. That's what Vivian Hale whispered, her smile sharp as glass moments before the first bullet shattered the silence of Lincoln Park. Elena didn't expect to be caught in a mafia war or to risk her life for a boy who signed instead of spoke. But sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest courage. Before we dive in, let me know, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. The key turned with a soft click, and Elena eased the door open with her shoulder. A draft of exhaust drifted in faint, with grease from the deli on the corner. She dropped her canvas bag, kicked off her sneakers, and let the door shut with a thud. A dim bulb buzzed above the kitchenette. The apartment smelled faintly of detergent layered over something older sunk deep in the floorboards. Movements came: automatic pot of water, packet of noodles, the weary snap of the stove's ignition. Her phone buzzed. Tommy Alvarez. She hesitated, then picked up. Elena, his voice came tired but bright. Any chance you can cover my shift tomorrow? My kid's sick. I can't, she said softly. I've got something. A pause. You okay? I'm fine, Tommy. Right, sure. Thanks anyway. The call ended. She stirred the noodles, slid them into a chipped bowl, and sat by the window. Fork idle in her hand. No TV. Just the hum of traffic and the shriek of the L train cutting past Bronzeville. On the table, a cracked photo frame showed a younger girl squinting into the sun. Next to it lay a bent notebook, pages yellowing. Her fingers brushed the cover, then pulled back. 2 taps on the wall. Elena, Mrs. Geller's muffled voice drifted through. Sweetheart, why's your light still on? Just finishing dinner, Elena called back. You barely eat. Come over sometime. Maybe, she murmured. Elena rinsed the bowl. At the window, a red ball rolled down the sidewalk. She leaned out. Hey, you drop this. A boy in a hoodie skidded to a stop, grin wide. Thanks, lady. He dashed away with the ball. Elena lingered, fingers pressing the sill. Back at the desk, a candle flared its flame, trembling as her eyes lingered on the photo once more. One breath, then she blew it out. Darkness folded over the room, broken only by the train's distant rattle. The diner reeked of burnt coffee and second chances nobody wanted. Fluorescence hummed above cracked linoleum booths worn down by decades of elbows and confessions. A bulb over the pie case blinked like it couldn't decide whether to last the night. In the corner booth coat, damp with October mist, Elena cradled a mug gone cold. Her grip stayed firm on the ceramic, as though it might hold her steady. Across the room, the waitress shuffled past, topping off a trucker's cup without raising her eyes. A cough echoed near the bathroom. Neon leaked through glass, bleeding into the wheeze of the radiator. Familiar. Forgettable. Home wasn't an option. Sleep had become a locked door, and silence there only sharpened what she worked all day to bury. Then she noticed him. A boy sat alone in a booth that hadn't been cleaned since yesterday. He looked like a pressed flower, misplaced in a greasy cookbook, tailored blazer, gray slacks, polished shoes that didn't quite touch the floor, too composed for a child his age, and his hands moved. At first she thought he was fidgeting. Then the rhythm clicked. Structured, intentional. He was signing. Eyes darted across the diner urgency building. His hands flew faster, not idly passing time trying to speak. No one answered. The waitress glanced his way, then buried herself in menus. A couple near the jukebox suddenly studied their pancakes. A construction worker sipped coffee like it was sacred. They weren't ignoring him. They were avoiding him. The avoidance prickled across Elena's skin. Her hand lifted almost without thought. One word signed slowly. Okay. The boy's gaze snapped to hers, eyes bright as street lamps at dusk. His mouth stayed still, but his hands flew. You understand me? She nodded, hesitant. Rusty. He signed his name Luca. Said he was hungry. His father was close. When she asked where, he pointed to the front. No one stood there. Luca's smile faltered, then returned. Her fingers stumbled through clumsy shapes, memory stiff from years of neglect. But he didn't mind. He kept talking, and she kept answering. For a moment, the diner blurred, the buzzing lights, the grease, the tired faces. Just 2 people finally seen. Then the silence shifted. Subtle at first, like the pause after a record stopped spinning. Heads turned. Forks stilled midair. The waitress froze with the pot halfway raised. The door creaked. 3 men entered. Dark coats, sharp shoulders, scanning eyes. They didn't speak. They moved like machines, precise, unblinking. A fourth followed. He didn't walk. He prowled. Tall, composed, dangerous without trying. Midnight suit pressed crisp salt and pepper stubble, cutting his jaw. He didn't need introduction. The room adjusted itself around him. His gaze landed on Luca, then on Elena. She stayed still. Luca's hands blurred fast. Dad. Here. He slid from the booth, wrapping small fingers around hers. Not hiding, just holding. Steady. The man advanced. Elena rose, halfway throat, tightening though she couldn't say why. His presence pressed like a tide, as if the world always parted for him. He stopped before them. Blue-gray eyes dropped to Luca's grip, then lifted to her face. The voice came calm, even edged with warning. Who are you? And how do you understand my son? The diner froze. A spoon slipped from the waitress's hand, clattering against ceramic. No one moved to retrieve it. Luca looked up at her, then at him. He didn't let go. The hum of the diner collapsed into stillness. Conversation vanished. Adrian Moretti hadn't twitched yet. His presence swelled like a cold front, drawing every gaze toward the booth and holding it there. Elena swallowed hard. Pulse hammered in her ears, louder than the flickering bulb above. Luca's grip tightened around her fingers, anchored with surprising strength. She steadied her breath. I learned sign language because of my sister, she murmured. She was deaf. We signed every night. Adrian's gaze narrowed, but he didn't cut her off. She passed a few years ago, she added, voice unsteady yet refusing to drop. Since then, I've barely used it. Until now. Something flickered across his face, not sympathy, not curiosity. More like a stitch loosening a single thread tugged from taut fabric. Luca signed toward him. Adrian gave a curt nod, but his eyes stayed fixed on her. The diner began to empty. The waitress slipped into the kitchen, a man by the window, left cash under his plate and walked out. No one spoke. They didn't need to. Isolation settled. Adrian finally said, we need to speak, privately. His tone was even almost polite, yet the weight beneath it left no doubt it was an order. Instinct told her to refuse to walk away, but Luca's hand hadn't let go. His eyes carried quiet hope that pulled something sharp in her chest. She drew a slow breath. What kind of conversation, one, where I ask why you're the first person in months who understands my son, he replied without hesitation, and why you were sitting in that booth, tonight, with him. Every word landed like a charge, as though she stood on trial for something she hadn't known existed. I didn't plan this, she said quickly. I couldn't sleep. That's all. Adrian studied her, as if weighing pieces on a board, then gave the briefest nod toward his men. Come. Not a request, not quite a threat. Her knees locked, unwilling to move, until Luca tugged gently at her sleeve. She glanced down. He signed one word. Please. Memory rushed in her sister's hands, flickering through the alphabet in the dark, silent stories shared under blankets, the quiet of a hospital bed after. She closed her eyes for half a beat. Okay, she whispered. Adrian turned and walked to the door, one of his men holding it open. Elena rose stiff and followed. Luca trailed close, still holding on. Cold stung her cheeks as they stepped out. A sleek black SUV idled at the curb, its surface swallowing the streetlight. Adrian slid into the passenger seat. A man in a suit opened the rear door. Luca climbed in first, patting the seat beside him. Elena followed. The door shut with a soft final click. The vehicle eased forward without a word. Street lamps smeared gold across tinted windows as the city receded, diner, drugstore, bus stop, all dissolving into dark stretches of shuttered shops and pools of fluorescent glow. Luca leaned against her side, content. Adrian never looked back. Her reflection in the glass appeared faint, almost transparent. Heart pounding, she sat rigid, hands folded, watching the skyline vanish. This wasn't a detour, it was a departure. The SUV slid through iron gates that yawned open with mechanical precision. Beyond stretched a winding drive edged by boxwoods clipped so neatly they looked artificial. At the end, a house rose from the hill, like a guarded secret stone face sprawling, not quite old money, not quite new. Power dressed as architecture. Gravel shifted under Elena's flats as the cold needled her skin. A suited man closed the car door with the soft assurance of habit. Ahead, the front door swung open before they reached the steps. Someone had been waiting. The foyer glowed with a curated warmth, marble floors, velvet curtains, light fixtures worth more than her rent. Adrian walked ahead at an unhurried pace, coat slipping into the arms of an attendant without a word. He led them into a parlor vast as a chapel. Windows framed a black garden, an abstract painting hung over a dormant fireplace, and cream sofas sat untouched, their perfection more ornamental than lived in. Luca tugged her toward a couch, hands fluttering in bright, eager signs. You came. You stayed. Sit. Watch this. He mimed a frog leaping into a puddle, then erupted in laughter, full, unguarded, echoing across the cavernous room. Elena blinked, startled. So was Adrian, who paused mid-step, something flickering across his face. I've brought therapists, specialists, even one from Vienna. He lowered into a high-backed chair, elbows resting on his knees. He never spoke to them, barely acknowledged them. Elena shifted her thrift store clothes stark against the room's polish. And you, Adrian gestured slightly, walk into a diner past midnight, and he laughs. No accusation, no praise, just calculation. I didn't do anything, she murmured. I just signed back. Exactly. Luca curled against her on the couch, settling as though they'd known each other for years. Her arms stayed stiff at her sides, though her fingers itched to move to return something simple, gentle. Her chest was tight. This isn't my life, she whispered. I'm not equipped for this. No, Adrian agreed. But you're the first person who didn't make him recoil. She rose too quickly. I should go. Luca froze, pleading first, with his eyes then his hands. Don't go. Please. Just a little longer. Her breath caught. Her sister's fingers flashed through memory bedtime stories signed beneath a blanket, her name shaped with tenderness. That same ache returned sharp and immediate. Adrian rose as well, movements, deliberate voice even. When you find something rare, you don't let it vanish. I'm not an artifact to keep on display. That's not what I said. Maybe not, but that's what it feels like. The weight between them thickened. Luca watched utterly still. Elena stepped back. I came to talk. I never agreed to stay. Adrian didn't argue. He inclined his head once. A guest room will be prepared. You can rest before leaving. I didn't say you're exhausted, and the last train left 20 minutes ago. He moved past, leaving no room for protest. Luca's hopeful gaze held her in place. An attendant led her down a hushed corridor to a guest suite dressed in beige and velvet. A robe lay on the bed, a bottle of water waiting on the table. Elena perched by the window, careful not to sink into the chair. Beyond the glass, the lawn stretched into darkness, marked only by the blink of security lights. The room was warm, yet a shiver traced her spine. Her shadow wavered long across the tile with each unsteady breath. The ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers, music drifting over waves of polished laughter. Elena lingered at the edge, gown fitted too perfectly to feel accidental. She held her glass steady, willing herself smaller. Luca pressed close sleeves of his tiny suit, twisting in restless fingers. His gaze tracked the room, never straying far from Adrian, who was already cornered by a woman in crimson silk and pearls strung like armor. Vivian Hale. Elena knew the name, the face, the reputation. Vivian approached with deliberate grace, smile sharpened to a blade. And who might this be? Her glance raked Elena head to toe. Elena Marlowe, she answered. The tutor. Vivian's tone was silk over stone. She helps Luca, Adrian said simply, though the weight in his voice made even nearby guests go still. Vivian didn't yield. Noble work. And rare from the south side, wasn't it? Elena straightened. That's right. Charming, Vivian murmured. Not many from that background find themselves here. But Adrian has always had unusual tastes. Heat climbed Elena's skin, but her voice stayed level. I'm just here for Luca. Then let me offer advice. Vivian leaned closer, perfume cloying. This world doesn't reward sentiment. It eats it. Adrian stepped in. Vivian, all in good fun, she said before sweeping back into the crowd, her entourage trailing like shadows. The laughter around them resumed. Elena stood frozen, throat tight. Luca's hand squeezed hers gently. She returned the pressure without looking down, knowing the tears would come if she did. She slipped from the ballroom to the terrace, cool night air stinging her shoulders. The city stretched in a scatter of lights blurred through glass and distance. Vivian's words clung heavy as the perfume she'd left behind. Elena gripped the railing until her knuckles ached. A waltz rose inside muffled. She closed her eyes, brushed away a single tear, and let the wind carry the rest. Rain hammered the tall windows of the Moretti Library wind, threading through the old stone. A fire crackled low in the hearth shadows, tugging across carved wood and shelves that smelled faintly of age. The ballroom glowed beneath chandeliers, music drifting over waves of polished laughter. Elena lingered at the edge gown fitted too perfectly to feel accidental. She held her glass steady, willing herself smaller. Luca pressed close sleeves of his tiny suit, twisting in restless fingers. His gaze tracked the room, never straying far from Adrian, who was already cornered by a woman in crimson silk and pearls strung like armor. Vivian Hale. Elena knew the name, the face, the reputation. Vivian approached with deliberate grace, smile sharpened to a blade. And who might this be? Her glance raked Elena head to toe. Elena Marlowe, she answered. The tutor Vivian's tone was silk over stone. She helps Luca, Adrian said simply, though the weight in his voice made even nearby guests go still. Vivian didn't yield. Noble work, and rare from the south side, wasn't it? Elena straightened. That's right, charming, Vivian murmured. Not many from that background find themselves here. But Adrian has always had unusual tastes. Heat climbed Elena's skin, but her voice stayed level. I'm just here for Luca. Then let me offer advice. Vivian leaned closer, perfume cloying. This world doesn't reward sentiment, it eats it. Adrian stepped in. Vivian. All in good fun, she said, before sweeping back into the crowd, her entourage trailing like shadows. The laughter around them resumed. Elena stood frozen, throat tight. Luca's hand squeezed hers gently. She returned the pressure without looking down, knowing the tears would come if she did. She slipped from the ballroom to the terrace, cool night air stinging her shoulders. The city stretched in a scatter of lights blurred through glass and distance. Vivian's words clung heavy as the perfume she'd left behind. Elena gripped the railing until her knuckles ached. A waltz swelled faintly from the ballroom, muffled by glass. Elena brushed away one tear and let the wind carry the rest. Rain hammered the tall windows of the Moretti Library, fire snapping low in the hearth. Elena sank into a velvet chair that dwarfed her frame, arms folded tight. Across from her, Adrian leaned against the mantle jacket, gaunt sleeves pushed high, the glow catching along his forearms and the tired edges of his face. We've been followed, he said. The words seeped into her slowly. Who? Someone I destroyed years ago. He waited. Men like that always wait. The fire hissed, sparks curling. Wait for what she pressed. For an opening, Adrian replied, something small, something they can use. Like a boy who won't speak, her chest constricted. So I'm the liability. His gaze stayed steady. Not liability, involved. The storm outside pressed at the glass. I didn't choose this, she whispered. You chose him, Adrian answered. The moment you signed back in that diner, you made yourself visible. She shot to her feet, pulse hammering. You should have left me out. I tried. She paced into shadow. Her reflection wavered on rain-streaked glass. His voice followed. Decide. Leave now and I'll bury you so deep they'll never find you. Or stay and know what standing near me costs. Before she could reply, footsteps sounded in the hall. He turned toward the door. She slipped away. The corridor lay dim sconces, weak against the dark. She moved quickly past the grand piano and into the back passage. Voices carried from the wine cellar. Vivian's playing both sides. Marco's voice cut sharp. Another man chuckled low. She'd risk it. She already has. She's meeting Brenner's men. She thinks Adrian's fall clears her path to the board. If she suspects Elena overheard, the door creaked shut, swallowing the rest. Elena pressed to the wall, pulse unsteady. Vivian wasn't circling Adrian out of jealousy. She was planning betrayal. She drifted back through long halls, portraits watching without care, lilies wilting beside Luca's toy piano until she stopped at his door. He slept curled with a stuffed bear face, slack with peace. He hadn't asked anything of her but to see him. She rested her palm on the frame. Walk away, fear whispered. But she stayed. Back in the library, the fire had dwindled to embers. Adrian looked up when she entered. I'm still here, she said. He didn't smile, only gave a single nod. Later, she stood at the tall windows, arms clutched close, rain streaming beyond the glass. Her reflection wavered, fractured. Still here. Still choosing. Thunder rolled across the roof. She didn't move. Leaves drifted across the stone path, bronze and gold scattering in the breeze. Lincoln Park spread wide under a pale sun, the lake glinting faintly at a distance. Luca ran ahead, jacket collar flapping as he darted between benches, eyes bright in a way she hadn't seen before. Elena followed with slower steps, hands buried deep in her coat. They found a bench near the water. Elena sat while Luca crouched at her feet, tracing lines across the pavement with a twig. From her bag came a sketch pad, pages marked with simple faces. A finger tapped the picture of a smile, then she signed the word. Happy. He mimicked the motion, grinned, and pointed to his own chest. Next came proud. Luca repeated it carefully, then glanced up and signed back. You, her lips curved. Yeah. Another sign followed one, not on the page. Hope. The word caught her off guard. Before she could respond, Luca bolted toward a cluster of duck's arms, spread wide laughter, spilling into the open air. Warmth rose in her chest, a tenderness she hadn't allowed in years. Farther off, Marco leaned on the railing, murmuring into his collar, gaze locked on a black SUV parked too long at the curb. No movement behind its tinted glass. Elena noticed, then turned away. Adrian stood beneath an oak suit, cutting a stark line among joggers and strollers. His stance remained firm, yet his expression seemed looser now, touched by stillness. When she crouched beside Luca again, crumbs scattered around him, she signed, You okay? A nod, another toss of bread, ducks rushing closer. She brushed hair from his forehead and shaped one last word, fingers circling at her chest. Safe. Luca studied her, then returned the gesture with careful precision. Her throat tightened. A small nod answered him. Marco closed in, voice low. Time to go. Too many eyes. Without hesitation, Luca slipped his hand into hers. By the car, Adrian's gaze met hers. For a fleeting breath, she glimpsed the man beneath the armor, the father trying to surface. In the back seat, Luca leaned against her shoulder, drifting. She rested her cheek lightly on his hair as the city blurred past the window. The SUV stayed parked at the edge of the park windows, dark clouds pressing low until the light thinned. A gust tore through the path, scattering leaves. Elena tugged Luca's scarf, straight crumbs still clinging to his fingers. Marco had moved ahead, posture taut, one hand pressed to his collar. The tension shifted. Luca tugged her sleeve, signing again, and miming the toss of crumbs. She nodded, distracted eyes fixed on the idling vehicle. The jogger passed again, too soon, too often. A woman rocked an empty stroller, no child in sight. Her stomach twisted. Marco's order came sharp. Move, now! Then a crack split the air, louder than thunder. Birds erupted from the branches. Another shot followed. Elena's ears rang, Luca froze, and Marco was already reaching for his weapon when a figure stepped out near the carousel, rifle raised. Panic surged. Luca. Her voice cracked. He didn't move, rooted in place, eyes wide. A flash seared her mind. Another child, dark-haired terror, caught mid-scream. Her sister. Instinct cut through. She lunged, sweeping Luca against her chest, momentum, throwing them both to the grass. His arms clung tight around her neck. A second shot snapped through wood behind them. They hit hard. Her elbow struck a root, pain jolting up her arm. Luca whimpered, trembling. She rolled, shielding him, lungs burning. A bench exploded under a fresh bullet. Shouts blurred. Tires screeched. Her head stayed low, whispering against his ear. It's okay, just hold on. But nothing was. Marco's voice snapped through the chaos. We're pinned, 2 shooters, South Trail, 1 civilian down. She didn't dare lift her head. Fear hollowed her chest, pressing her flatter to the ground. Adrian's voice roared somewhere beyond fury, more than words. Another shot tore bark from a tree above. Screams echoed across the path. Time warped, seconds stretching thin, refusing to pass. A hand seized her shoulder. She flinched, eyes flashing upward. Adrian. Coat-torn face, taut eyes ablaze. He gave no words, just a curt nod. Marco slid back into view, gun raised. Cars here. Go. Adrian hauled her upright. She clutched Luca tighter as they sprinted, pounding across wet soil and crushed leaves. The SUV skidded to a stop, door flung wide. She dove in with Luca, metal slamming shut. Adrian and Marco piled in, and the car lurched forward before the locks even clicked. Silence clamped down violent aching. Only Luca's trembling breath against her neck, only sirens fading behind. Her cheek was damp. She didn't know if it was rain, sweat, or tears. Fingers stayed locked around Luca's coat. She couldn't release him. The SUV veered sharply. City streets blurred past. Gunfire ripped again, shattering the morning like porcelain under a hammer. Shouts ricocheted Marco, barking orders, boots pounding men diving for cover. Elena staggered backward, driven more by instinct than thought. Heat seared her ribs where something grazed. Damp spread across her sweater. She didn't check. She couldn't. Luca clung to her, pale and trembling. His hands blurred in frantic signs. They want me. They want Papa. Figures closed in from both sides, shapes moving through trees and benches. She pulled him tight, shielding his head as more shots split the park. A body dropped nearby. She forced her eyes away. "Stay with me," she whispered, voice breaking. "We'll be okay." A shadow lunged from the left. Fingers locked around Luca's arm. He twisted, soundless scream ripping his face. His grip slipped from hers. "No." Her cry tore out raw. She lunged, fingertips brushing his coat before the ground smashed against her knees. Pain lit her side like lightning. Still she crawled, dragging herself through dirt. Through smoke and splintered wood, she caught fragments, Marco pinned behind a tree firing back. A guard motionless by the benches. The SUV idling just 20 feet away, its back door yawning open. Luca was being pulled toward it, terror etched on his face. Elena screamed again, words gone, fury left. She clawed forward, and then time slowed. Across the path, another car waited. Behind its tinted glass stood Vivian Hale, immaculate, composed, arms folded as if attending a rehearsal, not a kidnapping. Their gazes locked. Vivian didn't flinch. She didn't move. She simply watched. Watched Luca dragged away. Watched Elena collapse. Watched the SUV swallow him whole. Elena's body shook. Blood streaked her arm, dripping into the grass. She forced herself up, raised one hand toward the vanishing shape. "Luca." Her voice ripped her throat raw. For half a second, his palm pressed against the window. Then the car swerved tires, spitting gravel, and disappeared. Her chest clenched, breath fractured. Her arm hung useless, heavy as stone, before dropping to her side. Sirens screamed in the distance. Marco shouted words blurred by ringing in her ears. Her heart slammed like fists on steel. She couldn't stand. Legs refused. Every nerve demanded she rise, but blood pulsed hot through the wound. Her vision wavered, not only from pain, but grief flooding back, dragging her sister's face with it. Another loss. Another failure. A touch on her shoulder, she jolted. Marco crouched, sweat and blood streaking his temple. "They got him," she gasped. "I know." His voice cut low and steady. "We'll bring him back." Her chest heaved. "Vivian." She was there. She knew. His jaw tightened. He pressed a hand to her side. She hissed but didn't shove him off. "Hold still," he muttered. "We need to move you." "I'm not leaving," she snapped. "We find him. Now." Marco's gaze hardened, flicking toward the road where the SUV had vanished. The sirens grew louder. Blue and red lights flared against the trees. Her fists dug into dirt. Clouds churned overhead, heavy with gunpowder and rain. Marco pulled her upright, her body trembling, blood seeping through her sweater. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road. Not once did they break. Antiseptic clung to her skin like another layer. Machines hummed indifferent, their blinking lights keeping rhythm with the ache in her ribs. White walls reflected her face back at her, pale, streaked with dried sweat and blood. Bandages wrapped tight around her side where the bullet had grazed bone. Rain traced the glass, streaking down in restless lines. From the 12th floor, Chicago blurred into headlights and shadow sirens, threading through a city that refused to stop. Her own world had narrowed to this room, this chair, this moment, after everything broke apart. The door creaked. Adrian stepped in rain, clinging to his jacket, bruise darkening his jaw. He shut the door, leaning against it, like the weight of standing was too much. Elena's fingers pressed into the blanket, hunting for something solid. "I should have seen it," he rasped, voice ground down to stone. "I swore no one would ever get close enough." She drew a breath, careful against the sting under her ribs. "They knew when to strike." "They wanted me weak," he muttered. Vivian knew Luca was the only place left. The name cut through her chest. He was right there, she whispered, and I couldn't stop them. His hand clenched against the chair back. I'll tear the city apart. Not a threat, just a fact. She forced herself upright despite the stitches biting her side. Then you won't do it alone. His head snapped toward her. You're bleeding. You should rest. I don't want rest, she pushed back, a voice unsteady but firm. I want him back. He tried again. Elena, I wasn't supposed to be here, she cut across him. Just a stranger in a diner. But that boy reached for me and I reached back. And now her throat caught, they've taken him. I can't lose another child. Something cracked in his composure. He sat beside her bed, fingers laced loosely, eyes hollow with memory. For the first time, Adrian Moretti looked less like a fortress and more like a father torn open. Elena folded a napkin in her trembling hands. Vivian was there. She watched. His jaw tightened. She always claimed to want what was best. Apparently, betrayal counts. She betrayed you, Elena said. She betrayed him, he answered. Rain thickened against the glass, the city holding its breath. I need you clear, Adrian said finally. No hesitation. You'll have it, and if we fail, we won't. Something flickered in his expression, fear, approval, both. He stood reaching for his coat. We have leads. Warehouse by the river. We move tonight. She nodded once. No hesitation. At the door, he paused, hand on the knob. Elena, her eyes rose. If anything happens to me, don't stop. She let the silence stretch before answering. Bring him home. We'll speak of promises then. Their gazes locked, no longer stranger and captive, but two fractured souls caught in the same storm. He left, boots fading down the corridor. Elena pressed a palm to her bandage. Pain burned, but it steadied her. The choice was made. Rust clung to the night, carried by the groan of ships out on the lake. Elena crouched behind a row of barrels on the pier ribs, aflame with each breath. Blood seeped through the gauze beneath her coat, warmth spreading where she pressed her hand to keep steady. She hadn't told Adrian. He would have kept her behind, guarded, powerless. But Luca wasn't just his son anymore. He had reached for her, and she had answered. The warehouse loomed at the water's edge, hulking under the moon like some wounded beast. A single light stuttered above the door. Most windows were boarded, but one corner pane had fractured, leaving a gap wide enough. Elena steadied herself, pulled in a breath, and began to move. Broken glass scraped her coat as she slid through the gap. Warm, heavy air clung to her throat, tinged with dust and diesel. Voices carried from deeper in the warehouse. Orders barked, metal striking concrete, boots grinding the floor. She kept low, weaving between crates stamped with fading labels. Ears strained for anything, cough, sob, whisper. Then barely a sound, light fingers tapped against the wall. Her chest locked. A small face peeked through a stack of pallets. Eyes wide, frightened and alive. Luca. Relief nearly dropped her to her knees. He pressed his palms together, quiet, then tapped his chest. I'm okay. Her reply shook as she signed back. I'm here. I've got you. He nodded, pointing toward a locked utility door. Their way out. A voice shouted across the room. She ducked behind a pillar as two men strode past, one lugging a crate, the other with a clipboard. When their footsteps faded, she slid closer to Luca. You know the code, she whispered at the keypad. His small fingers moved quickly, 4 digits. Green light. A click. The lock gave. She reached for him, cold steel pressed against her spine. Going somewhere, sweetheart, Vincent's drawl oozed out of the dark, slick and poisonous. Her body went rigid. He stepped into view, pistol loose in his hand, grin cut sharp. Hair slicked back, suit too polished for the dirt he waded in. Always dressed for a toast, even with blood on his shoes. Didn't think you had it in you, he went on, circling. Sneaking in here alone, bold. Dumb, but bold. Luca shrank behind the crates, shoulders shaking. Don't touch him, Elena forced out. Vincent chuckled. Relax. He's not mine to break. Just another piece on the board. Her eyes darted to the open door. 6 steps, maybe 7 if the pain in her ribs buckled her. Luca couldn't make it without her. I could scream, she murmured. He leaned closer, breath sour. And I'd have to be messy. Hate that. Light flickered overhead. Metal siding rattled with the wind. Somewhere outside, an engine roared. You think Adrian's not coming, she asked. I'm counting on it, Vincent said smoothly. He's angry. Anger makes men stupid. But you, the gun dipped slightly. You're the wild card. Her gaze flicked toward Luca, crouched and silent. What do you want, she asked. Control, he sighed, dramatic. Respect. And people like you make the weak think they can stand. That's dangerous. He raised the pistol, aiming at her shoulder. Stay quiet, nothing breaks. Make noise, and the boy watches it happen. Her breath steadied through her nose. Hands trembled, but she held firm. Then Luca moved. A cry ripped from his throat, loud, unguarded, the first sound she'd heard from him. Vincent jerked, startled. Elena lunged. Her shoulder slammed into his ribs. The gun clattered to the floor. She seized Luca's arm, yanking him through the open door, as Vincent roared behind them. Alarms wailed. Red lights blinked alive. Boots thundered after them, shouts ricocheting off concrete. Flashlights tore through the dark. She pulled Luca into the narrow alley between buildings, lungs burning, vision swimming. The lake wind lashed her face, but it only sharpened her focus. Luca's fingers clenched tight around hers, the taste of salt and iron thick on her tongue. She didn't look back. Vincent shoved her forward, gun pressed to her skull. Elena stumbled through a rotting doorframe into stale concrete and rust. One bulb swung overhead, throwing yellow tremors across cracked walls. Luca perched on a crate at the far end, arms wrapped tight around his knees. His eyes shot up the instant she entered, wide, frantic, desperate. Move, Vincent ordered. Elena edged 2 steps toward the boy before he yanked her back by the collar. No reunion yet, he murmured. Let's not ruin the suspense. Her shoulder throbbed where the bandage had split, warmth seeping through the fabric. Vincent turned to Luca. See this woman? His voice slid smooth, too casual. She thought she could waltz in here and change the rules. But rules don't bend, kid. They snap and they break people with them. Luca's fingers twitched. Elena caught the sign. Are you okay? She gave the faintest nod, sign behind her back. Don't be afraid, Vincent's eyes narrowed. Touching. The secret poetry of martyrs. He shoved her to the center of the room, forcing her onto her knees. Cold cement gnawed through denim. You want a twist, he asked, circling gun, unwavering. Vivian, the darling heiress, Adrian's partner, future bride. She handed us everything: camera feeds, rotation schedules, passwords. Gift-wrapped treachery, and for what to make sure, once she's Mrs. Moretti, the war disappears. No blood, no noise. Just contracts and champagne. Elena's pulse pounded. She wouldn't. Oh, she did, Vincent cut her off. You, Elena, are the wrinkle she didn't plan. The diner girl with tired eyes who makes broken boys laugh. His smile thinned. You're inconvenient. Her gaze dropped to the floor, stomach churning. It wasn't just Adrian's enemies, it was his circle, polished and perfumed knives hidden in pearls. You're lying, she whispered, though conviction wavered. Vincent crouched, whisper hot at her ear. Then ask her. She's waiting in the car, lipstick still fresh from kissing Adrian goodbye before torching everything he built. Her hand brushed along the floor, searching for a shard, a nail, anything. Nothing. Luca signed again, trembling. Don't let them hurt you, she mouthed back. I won't. Engines rumbled beyond the walls. Gravel shifted under heavy tires. Vincent straightened, grin spreading. Ah, the cavalry. He hauled her up by the hair, pressing steel firm against her temple. Let's test loyalty, shall we? His radio spat static. Sir, vehicles approaching. 3 SUVs. Armed. Perfect, he muttered. He kicked a crate aside, dragging her to the door. Cold wind tore through as headlights flared across the yard. Dark shapes moved through, the glare, rifles lifted. Adrian, Vincent roared. A voice cut back, sharp, unyielding. Let her go. Vincent pressed the muzzle harder against her skull. One more step, and she dies. Engines idled the yard, bracing like lungs before a scream. Luca stood in the doorway, trembling, edging closer. Elena's breath came ragged. She angled her head just enough to whisper, Don't. He won't let you leave, Vincent hissed against her cheek. Then let's make sure he walks in. He jabbed at his radio. Tell him alone, or the walls get painted. Stillness. Elena's knees burned against the floor. Her heart beat against the barrel. Then a sound broke it. Papa? The word tore raw from Luca's throat. Vincent faltered. The warehouse door groaned wider. One shadow stepped forward into the blaze of headlights. Gunfire split the night like a jagged storm, each crack rattling the walls. Dust rained from the rafters, smoke coiled under the doors. Shadows slashed across the windows, swift-armed, relentless. Vincent's grip on her shoulder slipped. The barrage unsettled him. His breath grew sharp, eyes darting toward the entrance. Across the room, Luca crouched against a crate, lips parted in silent panic. Elena shifted fingers, skimming the floor behind her. Her hand curved into a shape. North wall. Crawl low. Now. Luca blinked, frozen. She repeated the sign slower this time, steadier. A long second stretch, then Luca's limbs jerked into motion. He flattened against the dirt, crawling inch by inch toward a gap where the planks had rotted away. His shoes barely scraped. Vincent didn't notice. He paced toward the entry, weapon raised, muttering sharp and uneven. "They're early," she said. 10 minutes. The steel door blew inward. A concussion of light and sound slammed through the room. Elena flinched, ears ringing. Vincent staggered back, blinded. Through the haze, Adrian appeared, black gear movements, clean eyes locked on his son. The man Elena had glimpsed before was gone. What stood now was all steel and intent. Behind him, men flooded in rifles, sweeping corners, boots hammering orders, cutting the air. Smoke rolled upward from a canister, thick and gray. Elena dropped to her knees and signed fast, sure. "Keep moving. 5 more steps." Luca obeyed, slipping through the gap, vanishing into the night. Her chest loosened. Vincent caught the flicker too late. His head snapped, eyes widening at the boy's retreat. "No." He swung on her. She struck first, an elbow to his ribs. His breath snapped, gun lifting wild. She drove her shoulder hard into his chest. The weapon fired blast, ripping into the beam above. Sparks rained. They grappled, sweat and grit slipping between their hands. Another shot tore sideways. A pipe shrieked. Adrian's voice barked across the chaos. Boots pounded closer. Elena twisted, yanked the pistol free, hurled it skidding across the floor. Vincent lunged after it, too slow. Adrian's lieutenant crashed into him, knocking both to the concrete. Zip ties snapped around his wrists as he bled curses into the dust. Elena's knees weakened. She braced against a beam chest, burning. Luca was gone, safe. Adrian reached her hand steady on her forearm. "Where is he out?" she rasped. "I got him out." His gaze flicked to the broken wall, then back. He nodded once, slow, deliberate. Around them, the warehouse churned, radios, hissing orders flying. But Adrian didn't look at Vincent writhing on the ground. His eyes stayed on Elena, the blood on her sleeve, the dust clinging to her hair, the clarity that hadn't been there before. "He listened to you," he said. She nodded. "Barely. You both did." Her lips trembled, but no sound came. The door banged open again. A scout rushed in. "Sir, we found Vivian's car." "Empty. She's gone." Adrian's jaw hardened. "Lock down the roads. Use everything." His tone needed no force. It was already final. Elena leaned back against the beam pulse, hammering. Something had shifted, not just the battle, but her. She was no longer the woman waiting for others to fight. She had stood. She had won something raw and undeniable. A clang echoed from the rear hallway. Adrian's hand went to his weapon. She straightened, pushing off the beam. Without speaking, she fell into step beside him. Smoke clung to the rafters, curling with the heat of gunfire. Sirens keened in the distance, swallowed quickly by the crash of waves against the dock. Elena crouched against a crate, arms wrapped tight around Luca's trembling body. He buried his face in her chest, clutching her shirt with desperate strength. Her heartbeat thundered at his temple, not from fear, but from the brutal clarity that they were alive. Across the ruin, Adrian stood unshaken, carved from shadow and firelight. Vincent staggered upright, blood streaking his cheek, weapon hanging loose in his grip. His gaze flicked between Adrian and the exit ferrule and cornered. Smoke coiled at his boots. "She promised protection," he rasped. "You weren't supposed to." The shot cut him short. Steel walls swallowed the echo. He crumpled before finishing the sentence, gun clattering across concrete. The disbelief etched on his face froze with him. Elena flinched at the crack, but her eyes didn't leave his body. Adrian lowered the pistol with steady hands. His jaw was stone, not vengeance, just a grim necessity fulfilled. Boots thundered in behind him, uniforms, tactical vests, movements drilled and exact. Radios crackled. Target neutralized. Second suspect secured. Perimeter locked. Adrian ignored them. His focus shifted only when Elena pulled Luca up from the crate. The boy clung to her trembling while ash drifted into her hair smoke tracing her shoulders. Through the haze came Vivian. Her designer coat hung open, heels scuffed, hair tangled by wind. The poise she'd carried for years had fractured. Her face looked brittle, her eyes darting like glass about to splinter. "You set me up," she hissed. Adrian stepped past without hesitation. "I protected my family." The words landed heavier than any shout. Officers didn't wait for more. Cuffs locked. Files exchanged hands, signatures, photos, surveillance reels. Everything she had hidden, now exposed, turned to evidence. Elena caught her gaze for a moment. Not triumph, just pity. Vivian had thrived on silence, manipulation, control. In the end, one boy's hands and one woman's refusal to stay small had undone her. A medic approached Elena, reaching for her side. She shook her head. Luca pressed closer, fingers clutched at her waist, eyes fixed on Adrian. He approached slowly, stopping just a breath away. His hand hovered uncertain. Then the back of his knuckles brushed her shoulder, tentative, trembling, not from weakness, but from everything he'd kept buried. Her skin warmed at the touch. Not pain, something older, gentler. Their eyes met in the haze. His steel had burned away, leaving only ash and rain, raw and human. "Thank you," he whispered. She didn't answer. Words felt empty. She covered his hand with hers instead. The noise receded, boots, radio's glass, breaking underfoot, all blurred to nothing. What remained was the weight of his touch, Luca's fingers tangled in hers, and the fragile stillness after the storm. Adrian's breath shuddered out. His hand stayed anchored on her shoulder. Around them, fire crews doused the embers. Flashlights swept the wreckage. Orders flew. But Elena only saw light filtering through the smoke, thin silver, almost soft. The warehouse had been a tomb. Now it cracked open like something new. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to face it. Morning spread across the library in pale ribbons, skimming high shelves and catching dust in its glow. The fireplace lay cold, yet the room carried a quieter warmth, like the start of something not yet named. Elena curled in the window seat, a blanket loose around her shoulders. Two notebooks rested in her lap, one frayed and yellowed its pages, heavy with old memories. The other fresh, filled with drawings and the signs she and Luca had made together. Past and present lay side by side, leaning gently into each other. Her fingers lingered on a page where her sister's handwriting had once traced the sign for safe. The ink had faded, but the motion stayed sharp in memory. She breathed out, slowly, trembling, then let her gaze drift toward the garden. Luca stood in a sunlit patch near the roses, showing a young guard the sign for trust. His hands moved with easy confidence, his grin wide. A breeze ruffled his hair, and the guard chuckled, clapping once in recognition. Elena's lips curved faintly, though her eyes shimmered. She touched the bracelet on her wrist, tiny pink beads spelling a name long gone. Her thumb stroked the worn thread before she unfastened it. For a moment she cradled it in her palm, then placed it into a small wooden box beside her. "I didn't keep my promise," she whispered. The words barely carried across the room. "But this time, I protected someone else's little girl." Her throat tightened. The tears that rose didn't sting like before. The library door creaked. She turned. Adrian leaned on the frame, tired in a way no sleep could mend. He crossed the room without speaking and sat beside her on the bench. Their shoulders didn't touch yet. His presence steadied her like tide against stone. "I was always afraid," she said quietly, eyes fixed on the box, "that if I let anyone in again, I'd lose them too, like her." His voice stayed even, and now her paws stretched. "Now I'm terrified that I almost didn't try." He gave a single nod as though the weight of it was familiar. Then softer. "Love isn't a weapon, Elena. You don't earn it by surviving enough pain. You deserve it because you are." Her gaze lifted slowly. His hand reached up, tentative, brushing her cheek as if she might vanish at his touch. His thumb traced beneath her eye where unshed tears glimmered. She didn't flinch. Breath caught in her chest. She closed her eyes, and in the hush that followed, he kissed her. No urgency, no demand. Just an offering, gentle, certain. A kiss that told her you are not broken. A kiss that told her, I see you. Still here. still standing. She leaned in hand, resting over the beat of his heart, his fingers tangled with hers, holding fast. When they pulled apart, silence lingered softer than before. The library felt different now, not a tomb of memory, but a space that allowed healing. From the garden came Luca's laughter, bright, careless, alive. Elena rested her head on Adrian's shoulder. His arms circled her, drawing her close without force. She squeezed his hand gently, and though no promises were spoken, something inside her, long, knotted, and raw, finally loosened. The chamber was colder than any courtroom she'd known, not in temperature, but in the steel polish of power. Rows of investors and board members lined the table faces, carved into masks of scrutiny. Reporters clustered behind them, cameras sparking, pens scratching fast. This was no trial. This was sharper. Money wrote the verdicts here, and reputations bled quietly behind polished doors. At the center sat Vivian Hale, tailored gray suit hair, immaculate lips painted crimson, like a blade held steady. She didn't flinch, didn't blink. She ruled the room by stillness alone, until Elena stepped forward. No one announced her. No titles were listed. She wasn't escorted by a lawyer nor flanked by guards. Just her wearing a simple navy dress, hair tied back, documents in one hand, the other steady at her side. The chair cleared his throat. "Elena Marlowe, you may proceed." She rose, placed a folder on the polished table with steady hands. Her voice carried clear and even. "Contained here are communications between Ms. Hale and members of the Torino Syndicate. They include security leaks from the Moretti estate and directives tied to the abduction of Luca Moretti." A ripple passed through the room. Murmurs. Shuffling papers. A lawyer bent toward the chairman, whispering urgently. Elena pressed play on a brief clip. Vivian's voice filled the chamber, cold and calculated. "We push him to desperation. And when the city's on fire, I'll be the only one holding water." The silence that followed was jagged. Vivian's eyes finally shifted, sharp as glass. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I know exactly what I'm doing," Elena replied, meeting her stare without blinking. Behind her, Adrian remained still, hands folded, offering nothing but presence. He wasn't here to speak. He was here to let the world see she no longer needed someone else's voice. A board member leaned forward. "Do you deny the authenticity of these materials?" Ms. Hale. Vivian stood abruptly. "This is a witch hunt. 17 years I've given this council, billions, brought in credibility, restored power, consolidated. And now you place faith in the word of a..." She broke off, gesturing toward Elena. "A what?" Ms. Hale, another member, asked evenly. No answer. Just silence, heavy, damning. The vote took 11 minutes, 8 for removal. 1 abstained, none opposed. Vivian Hale dismissed, stripped of seat and influence. The gavel struck. Decision final. Elena gathered her folder, tucked it beneath her arm, and turned. No victory speech. No gesture of triumph. Just a steady walk to the doors as cameras exploded in light. Adrian waited beyond them. He didn't speak, only reached for her hand, not to claim, not to lead, but to anchor. She let her fingers thread through his. No hesitation. Together they moved past journalists, through the shouted questions, into the blaze of noon. Sunlight washed her face in unforgiving brightness, but she didn't turn away. Behind a tower of glass and ambition carried the ashes of someone else's empire. Ahead the path was unwritten, and for once she welcomed that. The afternoon sun spread gold across an open field, where a half-finished building stood framed by young oaks. Paint cans dotted the grass, brushes drying on a tarp tugged by wind. On a ladder, Elena worked in jeans flecked with white hair, tied loosely, sleeves rolled to the elbow. She hummed something wordless as she dragged clean strokes of paint along the siding. Below, Luca sat cross-legged beside a boy with thick glasses and cautious eyes. Slowly, patiently, he tapped letters into the boy's palm. When the boy signed hello back, Luca's laughter broke free, bright and unguarded. His hands flew with delight as he signed "You did it." Elena watched, brush pause midair, a familiar sting blooming behind her eyes, but no tears fell. "Not today." From behind the building, Adrian's voice called out, rough but light. "We could use another set of hands at the fence." She climbed down, grabbed a rag to wipe her fingers, and walked toward him. He was shirtless under the afternoon heat, sweat darkening his collarbone sleeves of his undershirt, bunched at his elbows as he hammered a wooden post into the dirt. His smile when he saw her wasn't wide, but it was real. "Here." He handed her a glove. We've got 3 more boards to go. They worked without much talk, the rhythm of wood and nails filling the space between them. Occasionally, Elena glanced toward Luca. Always Luca now chasing the boy around the edge of the lot, their laughter bouncing off the half-built walls. At the center of the property, near a circle of soft-turned soil, stood a tree no taller than Luca's shoulder. Its roots hadn't yet gripped deep, but its leaves swayed gently in the breeze like it had decided to trust this place. Luca had dug the hole himself, tiny hands working with all the seriousness of someone twice his age. Marco had stood beside him, arms crossed, the usual tension in his jaw replaced by something quieter. When the last bit of soil was packed in, Marco had clapped the boy's shoulder, no words, just a nod. Later, as dusk crept in, the backyard glowed under strings of warm light looped between trees. They ate pizza on cardboard boxes, plastic cups filled with lemonade. Luca sat beside his new friend, showing him how to sign pepperoni with exaggerated flair. A gust of wind picked up. Elena reached to pull her jacket close, but paused when Adrian slid his coat over her shoulders without a word. The fabric held his scent, clean, smoky, something steadying. She turned to him. He didn't speak. Neither did she. They didn't need to. Their eyes locked, and in that silence, every wound, every battle, every narrow escape passed between them, like pages turning. There was no rush, no declaration, just the quiet kind of love that grows after fire. Luca wandered over with a slice of pizza in hand, cheeks flushed pink. He looked up at them and signed a single word. Family. Elena's breath caught. She knelt, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, then placed her hand gently over his heart. He leaned into her touch. When she stood again, Adrian was still watching her, expression unreadable, except for the faint pull at the corner of his mouth. She leaned in close, lips near his ear. Her voice came soft as smoke. I don't have to run anymore. His hand found hers, strong, calloused fingers threading through. The lights flickered above, laughter echoed across the clearing, and from the half-built center came the faint knock of someone hanging another picture on a newly dried wall. Somewhere in the distance, a barn owl called out into twilight. Elena didn't turn. She stood beneath the string of lights, hand in Adrian's, Luca's laughter, ringing like wind chimes across the open sky. Not perfect, not easy, but real, and finally, hers. Not all rescues come with sirens. Some happen in silence, in the small acts of staying, of listening, of choosing not to run. Elena's journey reminds us that healing isn't the absence of pain, but the presence of courage to build again, even if your hands still tremble. So wherever you are, whatever you carry, may you find the quiet strength to stay and the grace to grow something beautiful from the wreckage.